Alright, so we're going to discuss how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! First, you and a friend or another player will need their own decks each. Your deck needs to be at least 40 cards and no more than 60 cards. So these are the kinds of cards you can keep in your main deck. These are called normal monsters. All monsters list their name at the top, their level underneath, their attribute in the top right. There are 6 different attributes: dark, light, fire, wind, water, and earth. And I think actually there's a 7th. Divine is a new one that recently been added. The card's image will be here, or card art. Down here is the card's monster type. I believe there are 17 of these. I'm not going to go through them all, but there's zombie and psychic and so on. And down here in this section here, for normal monsters, what's called flavor text. Flavor text just tells you something about the monster. In this case, it says the Queen of the Galaxies and Mistress of the Stars. Down here on the bottom, you'll see the attack points of the monster. It's 2,900 and his defense of 2,450. Alright, so we have other normal monsters. This one's different because he's level 7, and so on. Alright, then we have effect monsters. Some of the big differences between effect monsters and normal monsters is that they are orange. So normal monsters are yellow, and effect monsters are orange. And instead of flavor text, they have their effect written here. We can see that down here. If your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand once per turn if a monster or monsters with attack higher than this card is special summoned to your opponent's field, except during the damage step, which we'll talk about much later on. You can make this card gain 700 attack until the end phase of this turn, or the end of this turn. So effect monsters have effects instead of flavor text, but everything else is the same. Type, attribute, name, level, card art. After effect monsters, there are actually some special types of effect monsters here as well. We're going to talk about them at other points in time. For instance, Maharaji here is a spirit monster. We'll talk about that later on. It says it over here. Maharaji, it says spirit here, a certain type of monster. We'll talk about that later on. Here, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is a special type of monster as well, called a tuner. We'll talk about later on. And we also have here Torque Tune Gear, which is a union monster, which we'll talk about later on. So those are allowed in the main deck. There's also here Hain is a flip effect monster. We'll talk about flip effect monsters. They used to be more relevant. You can have these blue monsters. They're called ritual monsters in your main deck. We have normal spells. You'll notice Dark Hole here has a number 2 on it. That's because this card is limited 2 according to the current ban list, the current Forbidden and Limited list. These are also normal spells. This one, the Blackluster Ritual, is a ritual spell. We'll talk about that later on. Mystical Space Typhoon is a quick play spell. You'll notice that the ritual spell has a little fireball in the top corner, and the quick play spells has a little lightning bolt. Then we have Messenger of Peace here, which is a continuous spell. A little plus sign here on Megamorph is called, makes this an equipment spell. And this little more diamondy type of plus sign is a field spell. Then we have what are called normal trap cards. This one's limited 1, so is this one. But this is a continuous spell, has the infinity symbol. We'll talk about why that is later on. And this is a counter trap, which has a little arrow. So those are all the different types of cards that can appear in your main deck. The only one I haven't discussed yet is pendulum monsters, but that would be more confusing than helpful. So we'll talk about pendulum monsters much later on. Cards that be kept in your extra deck include fusion monsters, synchro monsters, and XYZ monsters, and we'll talk about them later on. For now, we're only going to focus on these cards, the main deck. So the rest of these don't really matter at the moment. So let's take a look at the duel field. Alright, so this is the standard Yu-Gi-Oh field. There are 2 sides. One is for yourself and one is for your opponent. Let's take a look at the zones. First, when you start the game, you will draw 5 cards, and this will be your hand. In real life, you'll be holding these. They come out of your deck, which is shuffled off to the right. This is the deck zone. On the opposite side of the field, we have the extra deck zone, where you can see your extra deck cards in the extra deck. your deck is randomly assorted because it's been shuffled. You cannot look at your deck. Next we have here, these are called the spell and trap card zones. In order to activate a spell or trap card, you play it in these zones. In order to summon a monster, you play it in one of these zones. These are called the monster zones. Okay. This little blue diamond and little red diamond are pendulum zones, but we're going to ignore them for now. We'll talk about them later on in the future. This zone up here is the field spell zone. You can see it actually has the field spell symbol there. Now, if you're playing live, you probably don't have a mat that points out where all of these things are, so you might have to remember where these zones go. You can also find them again in the rulebook. Over here is the graveyard, which is above the deck, but above the pendulum zone. Field spell zone is above the extra deck and above the pendulum zone. Now, according to the game mat, the official Yu-Gi-Oh game mat, there is no banish zone or remove from play area, so this is an unofficial location for what we'll be doing. Alright, so for now I'm actually going to load up a pre-designated duel to show you how to play the game.